How are you doing today, Tom?
I'm doing all right.
I'm feeling pretty good. Feeling pretty good. It's good help if I put this and keep my back up straight on this slop couch. If I did, I feel like this looks really stupid.
I like that you're calling it a slop couch.
I feel like there's nothing better to call this couch. There's no good way to sit on this couch. Like last time we recorded over here, I think I sat like this and it looked really weird. So now I'm like, not only am I uncomfortable, I'm self-conscious about the way I'm sitting on a couch. What if this will help me sit up. This does feel better. I already feel like I have better posture now. Oh, this freaking zit on my back. Did I show that to you? The zit on my back?
Yes, you do.
Dude, that thing is massive and it hurts. Ba-da-da-dum. Mixed reviews.
Mixed reviews. Zits reviews.
Zits review. Yeah, I guess, apparently. All right. Welcome to the newest episode. That felt like a terrible intro, but I'm sticking with it. How are you doing?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm all right.
It's hot in here.
It is very warm.
I am tempted to just turn on the AC and be, hey, by the way, this audio is going to suck, but it's not worth it.
No, it's not worth it.
The one day that just had to be a heat wave was the day we decided to record the podcast.
Yeah. Well, we got out for a nice walk, which was really warm. But we got back and we watched a movie.
By the title of this podcast, you already know we're talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
This movie really has the perfect title.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I agree. It perfectly encapsulates the movie, basically.
Just how it covers every genre, every style, covers such great character arcs, and
all within the same time. It's almost like it was named that thing for a reason.
Wow, really? Yeah. You're really great at picking up on stuff, Tom.
It's kind of cool how, have you ever thought about how movie titles actually tell a lot about a movie if it's named properly?
Right.
Like Everything Everywhere All at Once is probably the most perfect title for this movie. I could never imagine a better title for this.
Could be Space Jam. That's a good one. For this movie. I was just saying perfectly encapsulates. Encapsulates?
Yeah, that's the word.
Space Jam.
Yeah, it's a jam in space. And Ghostbusters is a perfect title because they bust ghosts. And Ghostbusters 2, they bust at least two.
Ghosts too.
See, movie titles are so cool.
What did you think of this movie? Your personal thought of this?
I've seen it twice now. And on my first go, I'll be frank, you and everyone else who's seen the movies definitely hyped it so much for me, right? Yeah. So when I was going into it, I was like, I had no idea what I was expecting. I was almost expecting a horror movie, right? Because a lot of the imagery you see about the movie outside of watching it is scary. You know, the light effects that circulate Michelle Yeoh's character constantly was all over the trailers, and super weird, dark, creepy looking visuals is all this movie was advertised to me as. So I was expecting a horror movie. And we get there and it's in the director's own words, it's a family drama, right? Across space and time. So I was really blown away by it. I didn't know what I was expecting throughout the entire movie, but I did enjoy it. Yeah. To answer your question, I really did enjoy it. And then on the second watch, I was even more excited about everything going on because I knew what was happening already. And I kept saying to myself, and then now this is going to happen. But it links into a million other things from the first watch. So it was really cool. The second watch, I think, made it a 10 times better movie for me. But the first go was just pure entertainment, and I enjoyed it.
That's kind of my rule is, in order to really, not necessarily understand something, but really to enjoy it, you gotta watch something at least twice. I mean, there's the time with Batman where we definitely overdid it, and we love and hate that movie now because we overdid it. But
don't watch Batman 5 times. Don't do it.
But in this case, like, I always like to watch something once just to understand it and kind of understand what's going on. And then the second time, I pick up on all the things that, I missed. Like, for example, with Us, it was the foreshadowing of the twist and the end of it is all throughout that. And you can't get excited about it watching the first time because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So I love watching stuff twice because it's just, you get into that. Like, oh, this totally like sets up this, and then.
What was your experience watching this movie? Because I think this is your third time watching.
I've watched this probably 5 times now.
Okay, so what is your experience through each time you watch the movie?
Even watching it just this afternoon was so much fun, especially because like when we sit down and watch them for the podcast, I'm so focused on the screen. I'm just like sitting like this the whole time, and then I'll write a note. When I first went to go see this movie, I knew absolutely nothing about it. And my friends were like, hey, we're going to Sudbury because it's not playing here in North Bay. So we drove all the way to Sudbury, which was like 45 minutes. We sit down, watch the movie, and all of us left and couldn't break down that we didn't know what to say after. It's like, wow. Like, that was awesome. But like, and then, of course, I had to go see it again, so finally I was in Ottawa, and I was like, oh, it's playing here, I can go see it again. So I went and saw it again, just instantly blown away, especially in the theater. Just all the sound and seeing it on the big screen was so fun. And then I got my hands in it one way or another and watched it 2 more times. Even that was awesome, just watching it with headphones. And then here now we have the Blu-ray, and we get to watch all the behind the scenes and all the little bits, and then that's just, I'm fangirling at that point, just like, oh my gosh, this is awesome.
See, I never got the opportunity to see it in theaters, right, because I really had no idea about it until you had already seen it, and it had finished its theater run.
Yeah.
So I only saw this movie in this living room. So I didn't get that massive sound experience that you usually get in the theater, but I don't think it necessarily takes too much away from it. This is a very visual film. Despite being very heavily influenced by Kung Fu cinema, I guess, like where sound plays a big part in their action. It did and it didn't, because it was just so visually encapsulating that I think you could watch this movie without any sound and still be just as blown away by the visuals of it, because it's very, very peak visual storytelling and in its essence. And I think the Daniels really used visuals to tell their story in the most creative way I think I've ever seen a film go. And despite this has only had a budget of $24 million or $25 million, which is insane for what they were able to pull off.
Even just the visual effects of the film are so simple.
Yeah.
And it just rocks my mind how it's a group of like 5 guys that did it over the course of COVID.
Yeah, but the purpose of this podcast today is to bring a positive and negative side to every movie we watch. You, of course, being positives and me being negatives. But today we're trying to switch it up a little bit more. Instead of it just being an opinion piece, we're going to talk about the art of filmmaking and why positives and negatives within these movies might contribute or not contribute to the art of making movies from a filmmaker's perspective. So, to start it off, because it's such a good movie, I think you should start talking us up about how good some things in this movie were, and maybe some downsides to them if you have them.
Like you were saying there, like, this is such a visual film. Like, think back to last episode we were talking about Parasite, where the film isn't spoken in English, you're just reading subtitles. This was a good mix, I think, of where they tell the story visually enough that you could probably watch this movie without any dialogue. Like, you can grasp like how awesome and epic this movie is just by seeing like little clips of it without any audio, right? And I think they did such a great job having such like really quick inserts and really quick little shots to visually like show you and explain you these really complex time and multiverse things. But even just like how we get in between scenes, like teleporting between the multiverses, it's so well done because they have a little bit of the next thing in each shot. For example, the fight scene between Joy and Evelyn were kind of in the beginning of Act 2 everywhere. There's the fight scene where they just jump and jump and jump and jump. And there's just one little practical thing like the pieces of the piñata flying through, or the little bit of doodle on the mop that takes us into the cartoon. Like just a perfect use of just a little hint of something before and after to translate us to the next place. And they do it so well that it helps bring the audience and kind of keep you in on what's happening.
That's really cool. And I like the way that you explain that, because that's like a technique in editing that they use with audio all the time, like J&L cutting, right?
It's like a visual J cut or
Exactly.
visual L cut.
So normally, and for the audience who might not know what J&L cutting is, typically to make a cut between one scene to another scene smoother, they'll kind of physically in the editing software drag the audio over into the scene prior to it, or vice versa, carry the audio from the previous scene into the next one before or after the picture hits, so that it seamlessly drags you into it. This movie does it with visuals. They visually do J&L cuts in that way. Like, the one thing I can really remember is when Michelle Yeoh's character accidentally jumps to the different timeline that she's supposed to be on in the middle of a fight with Jamie Lee Curtis's character. And she's in the van, and then all of a sudden Jamie Lee Curtis's arm comes from behind the window in the van and pulls her.
Yeah.
But it's happening in the other universe, and that's like just, I've never seen that done before, and it was just so creative to do that.
It's almost like a match cut, almost.
Exactly. It's not quite a match cut because it's literal scene transitions. It's so unique. I think it just really pays tribute to the creativity and ingenuity that filmmakers have to tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of leads me into how chaotic this story is, right? And as a first-time viewer, it was really, and here's my catchphrase, it takes you out of it a little bit. It's like there's so much going on. I could imagine like any viewer who isn't well versed in stories that jump place to place so rapidly, I feel like it could hurt their viewing experience, because you mentioned that your friend's partner thought it was just a bit too bizarre and too rapid and too many weird things going on that made no sense. So it's hard to keep track of the linear fashion that the story is going to be telling, despite the fact that it's telling it through a billion different universes. And as a filmmaker, I think a decision like that is something that's well thought out and made purposely. They purposely decided to make it as chaotic as they possibly wanted. What happened? So what I was saying, as a first-time viewer, it's super jarring. It can really take you out of it. But as a filmmaker, it's important to consider the decisions you're making of how your audience is going to feel. I think the Daniels, as the director duo like to be called, made that decision on purpose and put their faith in the audience to kind of enjoy the chaos that was going on, and then threw you little snippets of the family drama in there in between the big moments, which I think it was done very well. And as an audience member who just goes to see a movie and have fun, it's important to keep in mind that you are watching an art form, right? This is something hundreds of people created to tell a story, and beautifully crafted one at that, about, in their words, empathy and the family dynamic and generational gaps. So despite the film possibly coming off as chaotic and losing some people who aren't necessarily akin to these type of films, it's important to remember that not all films are for you, and try to at least appreciate the art that goes into what you're watching, because it was beautiful. On a technical standpoint, it's not incredibly impressive, but it's done on such a small scale so well. They were able to achieve so much with so little, I think is the best way to put it. But on a critique level, the amount of chaos might have been a bit much for certain viewers, as in your experience you've witnessed, right?
Yeah, I think with that, it was very much just like the random things were just so wacky and wild. It was just kind of like a stretch compared to like some clever use of things, which I understand, but I also disagree with a bit. I find there is quite a bit of metaphor in there with some of the random things.
Metaphor.
Lots of the other things that happen in the film are quite more random than for example, yeah, he eats a little bit of lip chat, but then he has this random guy has a massive fight and takes out all these security guards. Like, it's just this little thing to kind of ease you into this massive, bizarre world.
Yeah, and I feel like they explain it fairly well. I wouldn't say perfectly, but it does a good enough in-your-face job of explaining that whole verse jump, because that's basically all the random things that happen in the movie are to serve the jumping of universes to gain skills from your alternate selves, right?
Yeah.
And the way they explained that at the beginning was Alpha Waymond, I think it was, wrote down the list of what to do for Evelyn to jump to where she needed to be to have the conversation kind of thing. And it was like, okay, put your shoes on different feet and then think about the janitor's closet and then hold that thought and press the green button. So it's like in your face literal list of like, hey, all you need to do is do something weird, think about where you want to go, and then press the green button. And then it's explained to you later about what that does. And there's like a little sequence where you get another in your face moment of something weird happening. And then once you introduce everyone doing verse jumping, you just get those massive scenes of super weird things.
Yeah.
And it turns from something really cool and sci-fi into a joke.
Right.
Which I think a lot of people aren't expecting funny.
Right.
Sometimes, you know? So then when you see, I don't know if you saw in the one scene where they first introduced all the Alphaverse people and they were about to jump right before she had that big fight scene with the riot shield.
District office.
There's the one guy in the back like humping a lamp, and then the other guy was like photocopying his butt cheeks, and it was like, you look at that and it's like, that's hilarious, but then it's like, oh, but this is a very serious moment.
Yeah.
Give and take what you want to put into your movie. I get that it's a lot of fun to make a lot of people do weird things just for like one simple goal of just gaining new karate skills. I can see where the meme-like energy is born out of it and really makes an audience take it not so seriously as it might want to be. Just another thing with that is like the big climax of the whole movie is happening, and then all of a sudden Bobu Jubaki is a rock, you know?
J-Jo Jujaki?
Yeah. We are not going to say that character's name right on purpose for the whole podcast because it was kind of a bit.
It's like how funny it was that she never gets it right in the...
In essence, again, these are all decisions the directors are making. They wrote this not to be serious, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, think of Swiss Army Man. It's so absurdly funny, and you just going into this movie, it's just a fun movie. Like that's the point, is that these are silly things that are happening in midst of this serious family drama.
Yeah.
Right?
It's really cool how they play on the theme of family and understanding people around you and the issues they're going through. And then almost juxtapositioning that idea with the fact that nothing matters. So it's almost like nothing matters except for everyone's feelings around you.
Right.
So instead of worrying only about you and what you're going through, because that doesn't matter, it's more rewarding for you emotionally to care about the people in your lives that you love,
right,
and to share love. It was really beautiful. And I think in the behind the scenes they talk about how the Daniels are just amazing at making beautiful things that are so weird and allowing the beauty of nature and humanity come through in the most ridiculous experiences.
Yeah,
which I think really rings true with this movie, because at its core it's a family drama, right?
Yeah. It was cool, like, watching the little EPK shorts, which were just the little documentaries that are made on set. And it was really cool hearing the actors just talk about their perspective of the story and how working with the Daniels. It was so much fun to me, just because it's like, I can watch a movie, but like hearing about how it all went and like the minds of these two directors, it's so cool to me, thinking how it seems so cooperative, like everyone is working together to make such a cool thing. And they did it so well, and it's really cool seeing another great example of co-direction, and that's something that fascinates me.
Yeah, I co-direction is a new thing for me. You know, like you get the Russo brothers and the Duffer
Which
brothers
the Russo brothers also produced this,
produce,
which is
yeah,
really funny.
and the Coen brothers. There's a lot of new, very popular director duos now, and I think that's really cool because as someone who has directed like my own mini things, just from that perspective, could you imagine doing a whole feature movie like all on your own?
Yeah.
Because you've directed a short film with a co-director, haven't you?
Well, I was gonna bring that up anyways. Like in my experience of it, we were very much just dropped into, oh, we want you to co-direct this, and I was like, okay, like yeah, for sure. But it was just we also had no time, so we never had the time to get on the same page. So it was really cool seeing like their process of they wrote it together, they did all this stuff, but they had the time to get the ideas together and kind of think it all through. Where mine was it was very rushed, and we had like a week to come up with a whole short film script. That went all downhill for so many reasons, but it was really cool to see like, oh no, this does work. And once everyone really is on the same page, you just get so into it, so cooperative, and it's so cool to see.
It's a beauty of filmmaking, I think, is how collaborative it is. Because after working on a few sets where there has been no collaboration, and then on a few sets where there's been amazing collaboration, it's truly a sight to see all these creative people come together to make something cool. And it's weird because when I was growing up, creative person was an independent person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's really cool now to see just highly intelligent and creative people actually coming together to make something insanely complicated, like Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how even the actors brought a lot to the performance and to the characters. Like there was a whole thing about Jamie Lee Curtis literally decorating her own set.
If you have the chance to get the Blu-ray and watch all these behind the scenes, I really recommend it. Even if you find it on YouTube or something, they were so fun to watch.
It's super cool. That brings me into how, as a viewer, again, the negative thing, I gotta talk about Evelyn, Michelle Yeoh's character. Up until literally the third act is god awful. You know, I mean, you sympathize with her on how she's the one who needs to stay strong and the one who needs to get her together in order to survive, right? Because they play this whole version of her character as like the worst, lived the worst life out of all the Evelyns in the entire multiverse. But following her is like, okay, she's super shitty to her really sweet husband. She's very misunderstanding of her daughter.
Yeah.
You know, she just has no clue about how anyone else might feel about what she's doing to them or how she's acting around. She's committing tax fraud, illegal. You know, she's just, from a viewer's standpoint, a horrible main character. You want to support your main character. You want to love your main character. And I feel like a lot of people might grow to resent Michelle Yeoh's character at the beginning and start to feel like disdain for the story that's being told. As long as they stick through it, though, they are able to see the growth. Because I think that was the main reason that entire character was awful to begin with, right? Is to show
the change in the end.
To show the massive potential that this woman has to be a better person and do the right thing. And then when given the choice at the end to either jump into the bagel or to make every timeline right that she's affected, she chooses to make every timeline right, which is peak storytelling for a character that I really need to use as influence for the characters that I start to write, I think. But what do you think of the characters and how they functioned and how they acted towards each other? Anything?
It was really cool to kind of see this older generation that normally plays like the villain in these young coming of age stories. They're kind of like the villains. They're like, no, you can't do this. You can't do this. This is wrong. Like, blah, blah, blah. And then it kind of, this was like flip where it was the younger generation person that was the villain of it all, right? As much as Joy could be the villain of that story. It was really interesting to see that flip of following the other perspective of that. It was really interesting. That's something you see very often from the characters. But I really liked the change. Even Gong Gong had character development. Jamie Lee Curtis's character, what was it?
Deirdre.
Deirdre?
Yeah, Deirdre.
Even Deirdre had character, like every single character in that little film had character growth. And even if it was just like even those little side stunt characters that she ends up helping in the end and gives them what they need to be whole. But it was so cool just seeing the characters felt real as much as they could in that movie. And even as much as like, here's one thing that I absolutely loved is there's these really beautiful and good looking actors and actresses in this movie that they make look real, and they're not perfect. They have gray hair and messy hair, and it was really cool to see they look like real people. And that was so interesting. And it kind of made me start thinking like, oh, you really see in most movies nowadays, it really is the stars all look way too good to be true.
Yeah.
And then think the new Thor movie.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Hemsworth is just like, it's kind of hard to relate to characters like that when they're just so bizarrely.
He was just glowing.
Yeah.
You know, like he was just unrealistically godlike. But
Yeah.
I mean, Thor
he's
is
playing
a
god, so that's fair. You're right. That was kind of a bad example because he is quite supposed to be a god. It's nice to see a movie where these characters look not gross, but I can't think of a better word. It's just they look natural, right? They don't have a lot of makeup, and that was something that was really nice to see.
There's a whole behind the scenes thing of Michelle Yeoh's wig tailored perfectly to make her look as real as possible. As real as a Chinese woman in America going gray running a failing business could possibly look like. The coolest thing and the weirdest thing about that is they made her look like that.
Yeah, right? It was a choice.
And it goes into how deceiving movies can really be, honestly, which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
You can make anyone look like something and make it believable. I think, look how much we raved about the Batman Penguin, you know, like we couldn't even recognize it.
Couldn't recognize Colin Farrell for the life of us.
It's scary how well these makeup artists do their craft.
Yeah,
know?
right.
It's like you can make Michelle Yeoh, you know, famous, beautiful actress in Hollywood and Chinese cinema and everything.
Make her look real.
Make her look like a real woman that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily...
It sounds so wrong to say. You know, make this person look real.
But it's true, like...
Unfiltered and...
Hollywood is filled with stars. Like, bright stars that are almost unrealistically beautiful. They're like the cream of the crop humans.
The GMO.
Yeah, and it's great that we can tell stories of real people, too, and have it work.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not unbelievable that this person can look like a real person, you know, and I think that's progressive.
We'll be right back.
We will be right back with Mixed Review.
That was sexy.
Hey, this is Jackson's mom. You should subscribe to their Patreon to hear extra bits like this.
Dude, ask anyone. I'm great at bringing waters around set. Amazing at that.
He really is. He really is. It's true.
I got my most recent job because I brought waters to someone.
But you worked hard, and he saw that. Don't sell yourself short. I think he would agree that there's way more to it than that. You're a great worker.
Oh, thanks, babe. You are too, I guess.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Don't stroke my ego too much.
And now, back to the episode.
And we are back.
Welcome back.
I think you have a couple points you want to bring up now, eh?
One thing I really liked, though, going back to kind of all the little random things in this movie, like the googly eyes and the bagel and like all these random things. This time we watched it, I was really trying to think of like, okay, but why bagel? Because my friend questioned, like, it could be anything. Why, like, a bagel just felt so humorous and weird. And I started trying to think of literally when she's going into putting everything on a bagel. She's really stressed. She's depressed. And kind of this bagel is her committing suicide. Like, is really the topic that they're covering with this in a very light way. Which I think, in a way, help cover a topic that is pretty hard to talk about and makes it fun. So with all that, it's kind of like her putting everything on a bagel. She's building up all these feelings and emotions inside to the point where she just gives up. And that's a common theme. And
can I just interject a bit?
Yeah.
With like my insight to the whole bagel thing? It's kind of funny because in the movie, she states specifically that she just wanted to put everything.
Yeah.
Just on a bagel.
All the Craigslist ads,
Yeah, and it's kind of like she never intended it because she wasn't intending to do it. She specifically says she just wanted to put everything on a bagel. Think about this, though, that she broke her mind across the universe. Like, that's why she is so depressed, is because she has the worst of the worst across every universe of herself. And in every universe of herself, she's I wouldn't say abused, but she's in an unhappy home life, like she's not accepted. You could assume that that spans across an infinite level of universes. So the amount of pain that this character is now experiencing, because she now feels the pain of every version of her possible, she just wanted to put all of her baggage somewhere else so that she didn't have to feel it anymore. And it was so heavy and so dense that it created a bagel-shaped black hole. So it makes total sense that Joy as a character would just, in essence, put everything on an everything bagel, because a kid would do that. But it
took that thing everything bagel quite literally. And
a kid would make that joke. I'm going to put all my baggage on an everything bagel so that everything is on a bagel. It's like a little joke, but then because of the sheer weight of it, it just turns into a massive black hole. And then she's like, this is now going to be my purpose. It's to find someone who understands what I'm going through, and I can show them that pain is serious. I wouldn't say it's a genius, but I think it does make sense if you allow yourself to think about it, right?
It's kind of like, you don't necessarily really have to be really into the artsy films like this, like from A24 as an example. You don't really have to enjoy these really artsy films to understand the points in this film. And I really enjoyed how this film is really rooted in that family drama, where metaphorically, really, you kind of see like Joy has all this chaos and random things going on, and her mom just can't understand that. Quite like real life. But once the mom starts understanding that, you then also see the next generation up of Gong Gong, and the whole fight there between he doesn't understand, and his alpha Gong Gong also doesn't understand Joy and just he doesn't understand, and he thinks like it's dangerous and wrong. And you just kind of see that like generational shift of people not really be able to understand each other until they talk, and until they're like at the end where you really see it, where they introduce Becky as her girlfriend, and then he kind of just like, oh, okay. And they discuss it and are able to talk it through. And I found the family drama is really rooted in the story of the multiverse, and just all this chaos and stuff trying to figure out. And then once they have a moment to sit down and talk, most movies always have that little scene right before the climax where it's kind of like the character learns the last thing they need to learn to be victorious.
Right.
And this scene really did well to like build up to like the rising action, and then climax was just like this right before the climax with this scene. It was this nice like and then drop, and then we're in the scene with the two rocks.
Yeah.
And I felt that was a really great way. They did it a few times where they just had these really calm moments where they teach the main characters what they need to learn, especially mainly Evelyn. You hear what Evelyn needs to hear in order to get through this climax, where it's she needs to understand Joy, and she needs to learn that kindness from Waymond. And I found it was so great to have in such an intense movie have these like little calm moments to get that information and reset as a viewer. It was quite also funny to be sitting in an absolutely silent theater and just have like the odd chuckle here and there. This really funny, just like, oh, and then you'd be like, oh, whoops.
Yeah.
This beautiful moment of being able to just read a couple words on the screen and just engage with these characters. And I really love it.
Just to give a little anecdote to what you were mentioning about the whole generational disconnect thing. I think this movie actually writes a generational disconnect almost perfectly. You have between Evelyn's character and Joy the generational disconnect right now, right? Because Joy grew up in a specific culture, and then Evelyn grew up in a completely different culture with Gong Gong. So Evelyn expects to raise Joy kind of in the same culture that she was raised, even though it's a completely different culture.
Right.
And Joy is expecting Evelyn to raise her in an accepting culture that wasn't kind of existent as Evelyn was growing up, which just rings so perfectly true, I think, in my own life, you know, like my family raised me almost the way they were raised. And I could have only imagined that continues through history, is your parents will raise you as best or as closely as possible as your grandparents may have raised them. I've had a lot of conversation with my mom about how my mom raises my sister and I, how she was raised by my grandfather and by my grandmother. But there's a lot of bias and judgment, I think, that you will hold on to as a young person growing up now. And you'll have this expectation of your parents in the current moment, despite the fact as how many years ago your perception of them is possibly completely different, because not only have you grown and gone through time learning things as the culture has shifted, you did that growing up, but your parents are doing that growing old. So you don't necessarily understand how your parents have changed, right? So I think this movie ties in the fact that Gong Gong has changed, but you don't see him change, right? Because you only see him through Evelyn's perspective as being a critical, judgmental, kind of by the book old man, right? So,
which is maybe even just her view of him, not necessarily the truth of his character, right?
Exactly. Because she views him as someone who abandoned her for the choices she made. So her expectation of him is going to be abandonment, distaste, judgment. Although we specifically see that Gong Gong, although we might not have seen him grow, we know he grows to be more accepting.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie when they have their little blowout between Gong Gong, Becky is involved as well. So I think it's such a real version of people's growth patterns in real life and how you don't always see them. I think this movie does that very well, showing how characters can change without necessarily seeing them change.
Yeah.
You get to see it in one way or another, and you see how they can change to be better people and more considerate of other people. One of my final points is I hated how this movie specifically was all exposition. It was exposition to tell the story and then visuals to enhance the exposition. We covered exposition in the previous episodes. I don't like it. You know, I learned in film school that show don't tell, kind of thing. Or as I like to say, spray it, don't say it. But I was thinking about it after I made this criticism the first time I watched it. I'm like, wow, they're talking a lot about what's going on and I don't like it. I have to consider the fact that how the hell are you going to show the story in this movie? It doesn't work. You almost need the exposition in this movie. And I think, again, going back to the theme of directors making decisions for specific peoples, I think they know that they had to do exposition for this movie. Otherwise, it just was going to be chaos without any ground to it. But
I think that for this example, it was very fun. And then, for example, with the rock scene, that's how you do some exposition in a very new, interesting way. And just having conversations in all these different multiverses to tell all these different stories. And how they all tied together was really cool. To me, it almost felt like documentary storytelling where you have all these different voices and you kind of create a story out of it. And it was really cool to see like this multiverse, they're talking about this and here they're talking about this. And they're different conversations, but the meaning of them is all coming together to this one point. And that was such clever writing. And I really liked that exposition where they told us all we need to know, but in all these different ways with all these different visuals. And they made it fun. They made exposition fun, and I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah, they really did something that a lot of people will look down on very well.
Yeah.
And my final point that I need to address, from a filmmaker standpoint, I hate to make this point because I think it's actually well done. But from a viewer's perspective who might not have the insight into what this point addresses, I think I need to talk about it for the sake of the podcast. The fact that this film changes looks and changes aspect ratios and changes frame rates and just so much visually, not so much what's happening on screen, but the format in which you receive it can be very disorienting for an audience when it comes to immersion. Typically, aspect ratios, and for those who aren't aware of aspect ratios, the best way to describe it is how the film looks on your screen, whether it's super widescreen with the black bars on the top or squared and 3:4 format, and color space is pretty obvious, like black and white or whatnot. Yeah. But I think part of a filmmaker's goal is to immerse your audience in your story and so that you have their full undivided attention for however long your film runs.
Yeah.
Changing aspect ratios, changing color spaces, changing formats, changing literally the look of the movie halfway through really will take an audience member away from the immersion of your film, away from your story, and it'll make them, not so much that they'll notice it, they'll feel it. You know, they're like, oh, this feels different.
Like, this is the first time in a long time I've seen, like, I guess it'd be a slow shutter speed. That it was so interesting seeing it was used really well.
It was weird watching it, to be honest. I knew exactly what it was, but it's like, oh, that's an interesting idea. It's a cool effect it grants you with the motion blur and the look. The changes in aspect ratios really can be jarring for a viewer who doesn't really know what's going on, and especially in a movie so chaotic. I feel bad for an audience member that lost their patience for this movie based on the aspect ratios. However, to give good reasoning as to why they're doing this, because this movie is a deliberate homage and reference to so many other different genres of movie, they changed the aspect ratios to fit those tropes.
Yeah.
You know, and to fit those stereotypes that you see in a lot of different kung fu action movies or romance comedies or just romance love stories, period, or sci-fi, which is another big aspect of this movie, right?
And even when they're looking in the past, it's all 4x3. It's very old-fashioned looking.
Yeah, and they actually, I don't know if they did shoot it on film, but they made it.
Definitely looks like it, and it looks great.
Yeah, so anytime they flash back into the 80s or whatever time, I think it was the 80s. Yeah, so when they flash back to the 80s, like when Evelyn was a kid or talking with Waymond or anything, it looks like a film camera was shooting it, right? To make it feel like the time period that they're trying to purvey. And it, from a filmmaker standpoint, phenomenal choice and brilliant execution. But to someone who might go into this movie not really expecting much, I could imagine they would leave the theater being like, it was so weird sometimes, like how it would look like film or how it would look like normal or how it was jumping from one genre to another. It can hurt a viewing experience or it can make it a million times better.
I think once you just can look past it and be able to just like, even just all the random things, once you can just look past how bizarre this movie is and you can just really dive into it and embrace it, it is just, it's so much better. Like, yeah, it may not be your typical action movie or your superhero movie, but just enjoy it and you'll just love it so much more. Don't try to fight it.
I agree. Well, you wanted to close this out with some of our favorite moments, didn't you?
Yeah, I just wanted to like talk to you and be like, hey Tom, what'd you love about this movie?
I think what I loved about it was how it didn't take itself seriously, but it still told a good story. Because I've made some movies where I definitely wasn't taking it seriously, on purpose, like trying to make something fun and lighthearted, and it just was awful. You know, if you don't take it seriously and you try to make something that doesn't take itself seriously, it just doesn't turn out very well. And I think I have to give the Daniels and the whole crew like an immense applause.
Tell me how you did it.
Tell me how I did what?
Tell us how you made something so silly yet so serious.
Oh, yes.
Sorry. That came across so aggressive.
Daniels.
Tell us how you did it. Oh, it's so great. Like, honestly, I someone who loves writing comedies and stuff, and when I had to write some serious scripts, I'd just put so many silly moments into it. I can never take anything too seriously, even if it is serious. I just like, at least if it's just a little hint of something, just to take, like, bring you back into, like, when something's really tense, like, especially like a little horror movie, I like just a little comedy moment. It's just something really light, just be like, haha, okay, and just kind of reset you. And everything I work on, I have little comedy bits in, and I was writing something for my friend as an assignment, and it was his script and I was rewriting it, and we were talking about it. He said it was a lot more funny than his original plan, but like, I mean, that's my point.
A big issue I have when trying to write comedy, because I don't think I ever finish anything, is like, I don't know what comes off as funny. I think these guys are amazing at balancing serious and funny. And you, in my opinion, you have to pay respect to the talent you have. Actors I've ever worked with are always excited to do anything. They just love everything. They'll do anything. They love it. So asking someone as talented as Michelle Yeoh, who has an insane CV of like very well done kung fu and well done martial arts movies with some of the biggest names in that genre of his like cinema, and asking her to do a fight scene with two guys with things up their butt, like you gotta pay some respect to your actresses and actors, right? So
it was so well done.
they did a great job balancing the sheer talent of acting they had and then having fun along the way. And it's something I wish at some point in my career I'll make something as good, nearly as good, right?
It was also really cool seeing stunt people as the characters. Like most of those side characters were all stunt people, and that was something I really enjoyed seeing.
I think nearly that whole stunt team were all YouTubers, they said.
Yeah, especially the two main butt plug guys.
Yeah, the butt plug boys. Sorry, guys. I don't know the actual name. No, the BTS said they saw them on YouTube and brought them out. I'm like,
that's so cool.
I think that's amazing, the fact that non-traditional filmmaking is actually getting recognized on a big platform now too, which is another kind of point I was excited to say.
Daniels, can you notice our YouTube video and bring us on for the next project, please? Please, thank you.
Any other closing out points for you?
This is, I think, one of my new favorite movies. It was just a great blend of just your Hollywood movie and an artsy movie, and it's one of those movies that, like, I sat down, I watched, and I went, well, I guess I'm never making a movie because nothing I make will ever be that good. But at the same time, like, seeing how they did all of it and, like, just think about, like, how simple some of those techniques were. And just, they did so much so well. And it's just, like, it builds that little part of me. It's just, like, I can make something like this. Like, it's doable. This story... My big, crazy idea stories are doable. This movie does so great at tearing me down and building me up because I absolutely love this movie. And it makes me want to go make movies, and it makes me think I'm never going to be good enough to make a movie again. Yeah. Which is, it's really complicated, but I love it.
No, I know how you feel. That's pretty much, honestly, that's all I have to say. I think that's all you have to say. And the last thing I do have to say is thank you to the viewers for enjoying our podcast. Yeah. And I hope any feedback y'all have would be awesome to hear. We're trying up a little bit of a different style here. And I think if you haven't already and you've gotten this far into the podcast, go watch Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, if you just listen to this, you're an interesting person.
If you've listened to all this and you haven't seen the movie yet, I mean, we didn't really help.
We probably just made you really confused.
I think we're getting close to the end here, and my final send-off is, I hated it. Cut!
Hey there, I'm Jackson's mom, and this has been Mixed Reviews with Tom McMahon and Jackson Brotherton. If you want to suggest a movie, leave us a voice message on our website. This has been a Jackson Studios entertainment production. Thank you for listening.